great to see you all. My name is Lynz, and I am the general manager and a podcast producer at Growth Network Podcasts. And we like to say that we make podcasts and we support people who make podcasts for organizations that care. So today we are going to have a discussion where we talk about our podcast, Mission Megaphone, which one of the projects that we came up with really early on when I started Growth Network Podcasts was we wanted a podcast that highlighted the really great work that other people were doing. You know, we make podcasts and we do that well, but we wanted to highlight people that are doing really, really good work to impact the world. And so Mission Megaphone was the show we came up with. And we've experimented with different ways to take that show to amplify the voices of people who are doing good work out in the world. And that's our mission with Mission Megaphone. And so when it came time recently to think about the season 2 of Mission Megaphone, we had the idea that we wanted to have a guest host. And the guest host experience would be that we would find someone who had the drive to have some really important conversations and would have an idea of who they wanted to talk to and why, and that we would kind of co-create something together. And so by chance, I happened to meet Jenny here, and I'm going to add Jenny here to the stream. And we met at a brunch somewhere, one of our few outdoor meeting in-person gatherings. I think I did one in a whole series of months, and at that one, I met you. And so as we were talking about a way to collaborate, it really became clear to me that Jenny would be the perfect guest host for our season 2 of Mission Megaphone. There's so many ideas you had, and that you were sort of in the position to start a media project and maybe would benefit from having some people supporting you in doing that. So it was really kind of a symbiotic thing that drove us together. And so we'll talk a bit more about that in a second, but I want to give Jenny a chance to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do and about your organization, Untapped Leaders.
Yes, absolutely. Jenny Vazquez-Newsum. I am an author, leadership facilitator, and founder of Untapped Leaders, which is a leadership development organization that centers marginalized perspectives in the work. So my background is in leadership facilitation and training and organizational consulting. And after having studied leadership frameworks for the last few decades or so, I realized that a lot of the theories and books and what's really popular it wasn't really written by anyone that looks like me, or probably wasn't even written by anyone that considered me as a reader. And so I've always found myself kind of stretching and contorting into these leadership definitions that didn't really resonate. And so that's where the Untapped Leaders work comes in. And so what we do is operationalize this concept of untapped leadership, the overlooked perspectives, the under-recognized, the underrepresented, and really centering that work around racially underrepresented leaders. But that really can extend well beyond that. So that's really the work that I do. And so it's been such a pleasure to collaborate with Lynz, collaborate with the Growth Network podcast team on bringing voice and story to this idea of untapped leadership. What are we missing? What have we overlooked for the last few centuries that now is the time to talk about and to lead from? So happy to be here with you in conversation.
Awesome. Yeah, it's been such a fun project to work on, and to be able to kind of check in every week and just kind of move it along methodically. And so, I think one of the first questions I have for you is, what has this project done in terms of giving you permission to talk to people you might not have otherwise had a chance to talk with?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it gives a wonderful permission to do that. We have, this partnership has offered a vehicle to be able to ask like these deeper, richer questions about leadership. And I often have these conversations in seminar sessions or behind, at happy hours with friends and colleagues, or just in these other spaces. And now like having the opportunity to say, with a formal like invitation, like, I actually want to capture your story. I'd love to capture your narrative, and having that as a way to reach out to folks that I admire, folks that I, hadn't connected with before, to say, I really can see your leadership in your field and your role in your, whatever industry, because we talked to a lot of folks from a lot of different industries. And so having this opportunity to point to something, to say, this is a structured, conversation, because we're trying to get to this amplification of your voice, of your story. And that really was just such a great entry point to now relationships that I will probably maintain well beyond that 1 hour conversation. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the things we find with all of our clients too, is the similar kind of feeling of like, oh, I now have a reason, one, to reach out to people I care about and who I haven't talked to in maybe a little bit too long, and say, yeah, oh, it's been too long. Let's catch up in this way, in a, a way where I can hear more about you. I can be curious about what you're doing. And then people start, I think what I'm excited about too is that there's another sort of side of that phenomenon, is that once these episodes go live, people will be like, oh yeah, I heard on your conversation about this. They'll feel like they know you a little bit, and
right.
That's kind of a fun little glow moment that we're hoping you'll have coming up soon.
Yeah.
So what other lessons would you say? What is it? Looking at my notes real quick, being transparent there, because we're busy entrepreneurs, and there's a lot to juggle. But So what is it about sort of the process and experience that has taught you something that you'll be able to use in your life and in your business going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always kind of thought about like the power of the narratives, and particularly, my work is to kind of challenge some traditional narratives around leadership, and just unpack a little bit of what has dominated the conversation for quite a while. And, I think that podcasting, this is for everyone here, like this is my first entry into podcasting, into this space entirely. And I am walking away with the awareness of like almost the essential nature to it, because the work that I'm doing is complex, it's nuanced, it requires that if we're changing a narrative, we have to kind of work through that narrative, verbally speaking, like just kind of talk through it. And podcast seems to be the only avenue that can do that. So, part of my work is I wrote a book, Untapped Leadership, which will come out in June. And that's a great avenue as well, like to get the things in print, to get a narrative in print that has lasting power. But I think what I'm taking away from our partnership is how podcast conversations, how these conversations bring print to life. Like it brings more life to the realities of it, that the ins and outs. And so I think you get to this layer of nuance that you can't any other way. And so that's what that's what I'm holding on to. Like, I hope, thinking down the line in the future, like how can I continue to leverage podcasts as a way to shift narratives, as a way to kind of change status quo, or like what's the usual, how can we have different conversations? So, yeah.
Well, I can see one that the sort of next way you may find yourself in that position is to, work on becoming a guest on a bunch of doing the rounds
Right.
of getting, okay, now let's share that narrative from the guest role, and
Yeah.
that could be a way that you take your knowledge from here and expand it into there, because that's the way to draw people into your world from other worlds, and
Yeah.
so it's kind of like an onion, you can keep peeling the different layers of the way this all can work. But
Yeah.
it also, like you're mentioning your book, the thing that I think is one of the best things about podcasts is they don't always move the needle on their own. The conversations are great and everything, but in terms of as a business owner and thinking in terms of return on investment
That's
for
right.
your time and everything here,
That's right.
what is it that the podcast can do? And one of the reasons that I really felt like, besides the fact that you're great, one of the things I thought made you perfect for this is that you have a project coming up that would benefit from some multiplication, and so that your book
That's
is
right.
coming out means that the podcast will serve as an added layer of depth and also a promotional vehicle for
Yeah.
everything. And it really works best to me when you've got a bunch of interlocking pieces like that.
Absolutely. And the almost like the equity that sits in podcasts, like there's that book comes out, and now there's also all of this, all these conversations where I've talked to leaders where we've collaborated and brought these stories to life and unpacked it. That's there that folks can just shape and understand what the work is really about. So yeah, absolutely, I would agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that multiplier effect is like one of the maybe like least understood parts, I think, of podcasting, because I think a lot of people do get into it. They think there's a one-to-one relationship between like, I'm going to get to make money on this way, and it's like, yeah, it's more qualitative project than a quantitative one in that
Right.
regard. But
Right.
I think that, especially when we start sharing clips from that podcast with you while you're promoting your book, it's just like adds a real more a more interesting set of promotional tools, and
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Yeah.
I think we're all just sort of looking for ways to gain an audience for the things that we're trying to do in that way, and so I think that all helps.
Well, that's why I love the purpose of Mission Megaphone, and even just with that title and the like, there was so much alignment naturally with this idea of a megaphone, and that's the mission, is to offer a megaphone to organizations or entrepreneurs or people that are doing good, and we need more of those stories out there in the world. And so I think that's where how we shift these narratives, or how we just really kind of shift and think the way we look at our worlds and what's possible, is by having that ecosystem of different avenues of getting that message out there. And so that resonates for me.
Yeah, it's been interesting with Mission Megaphone because, we kind of created it by group consensus. We're talking about the best way, what kind of project shows our work, right? Like if we're a podcast studio and we're working with production clients, how do we demonstrate our work? And, in an ideal scenario, that makes people want to work with us, right? So it is sort of an advertising vehicle, but we really chose to, in the first season, there wasn't a host because we felt like we didn't want to be imprinting our stuff on the people we were megaphoning. Well, the interesting thing about that was that there wasn't as much to dig into from a listener's perspective. And a listener might listen to one and the next one, there's no continuity, there's no thing. And so that kind of helped us move. But it's an experimental project in this way that we want it to have a presence and a vibe to it that matches what our insides want to do. And then as business people, we want it to help people magnify what they're doing and have people hear it. So I'm glad that resonated.
Yeah, I love it.
And so as we're both really busy entrepreneurs, what has it been like trying to sort of fit this into your schedule? One, there's like learning how the process works.
Yeah.
Two, then there's sort of doing it and repeat doing the interviews and stuff. What's it been like for you to kind of work that into your world?
Yeah. I mean, I have to say flat out, like, I don't know how anyone self-produces a podcast. I kudos to all those folks that do that, because it's quite a bit. And then even with having your support on and just all the aspects, I think what has worked well, is having, the structured, committed times of the week that podcast recordings would be scheduled. So it's not this kind of erratic scheduling and moving things around. We, collaborated early on, these 2 days for these hours. That's when we're kind of slotting in interviews. I think the work of like identifying and finding and reaching out to potential guests and going through the motions of like scheduling. And I mean, there's a lot, we want to represent folks that come well. And so all the materials to support them and the, social promos and all that aspect, that's quite that's a lift in itself. And then I think aside from that though, like it felt very doable. Like we kind of tackled thing by thing, and all of a sudden we were in a rhythm, and now we're recording our last few interviews in the next few weeks, and it became almost part of the madness on the entrepreneur side, but at least it's part of it. So it didn't feel like such a detraction I was never questioning the like amount of effort it required to then get the impact that I'm looking for. It actually aligned really well, from my experience. So, but again, like, I don't know, without the team, without, you all, I don't, you would probably never hear my voice until, years from now.
Well, and that's a little bit of the accountability too, right? It's like you gotta have people that you don't want to let down, so that you keep going to those things, and because it is, there's so many balls in the air. There's always juggling going on, and so you never know when you start a new thing. Like, okay, is this thing really real? Are we doing it? Until like there's a moment where you're like, okay, yep, this is happening.
We did the thing. It's usually after the fact,
yeah. And so, with any luck, we'll be having these episodes, starting to release soon. And, we'll be working through what it's like to put the promotional schedule together and everything too, because
right.
That's all, one thing that is sort of one of those secrets that you don't really realize until you start to make a podcast, is that promoting it is actually as much or more of the job than making it.
Yeah.
And so, thankfully we've got a lot of great content to promote, and, we have these cool tools. The world of podcasts has become so much easier because there are tools like Descript and these things where they transcribe everything for us, and we can collaboratively in the cloud edit and comment on different things and stuff. So, it's just it's a cool world.
Yeah.
We just sort of have to thread the needle with putting the plans in place and showing up to the meetings.
Right. That's right.
So yeah, are there any other lessons you've learned or takeaways you've had, maybe even from the interviews, sort of into the content of the thing? Sort of what's stuff that you think you're going to end up talking about and taking with you into the world?
Yeah. I mean, I think what was really wonderful is being a new guest host, like being new to all of this, it was the process of like finding the voice and like really thinking about, that flow. And for me, I like to just have as natural a conversation as possible. I know it can be hard when, there's a recording mic and guiding questions and all that. It shifts things a little bit, but trying to find, that level of comfort with the conversation. And particularly, I mean, I think, again, the work for Untapped Leadership is really trying to kind of poke at some pretty well entrenched definitions of leadership that may not resonate for a lot of us, and so it can be kind of tough conversations. And so how learning for myself of how to make it comfortable and accessible and just real, that was part of the process that I think I would take even outside of a podcast avenue that's a life lesson. How can we just have these conversations and just be real, and it's okay, that's a big piece of it. And then I think overall, I think probably the biggest lesson truthfully is if I were to do my own, if I were to kind of really start my own, I would absolutely, it doesn't make sense for me to do it on my own. That would not be a good use of my time trying to build a business and do this work in other ways. That's where I've learned this partnership was just such a wonderful kismet, crossing of paths that made so much sense, that showed me how much that it probably would have been a bad idea if I would have tried to produce my own at some point. So that was a very good lesson for me to learn, to take with me.
Yeah. No, well, and I'll tell you, the way that I ended up starting Growth Network Podcasts was while I had a day job, and I started, my girlfriend had a business where everything was made in Los Angeles, and it was a gift shop. And I was like, oh, I should interview the makers of this gift shop. And I wrote music for it. I recorded all the interviews. I edited the episodes.
Oh, wow.
By the end of episode 2, I was just couldn't do it anymore. And because I'd finish an episode, I'd have another one I needed to work on, but I really needed to promote the first one. And it was just a team of one, Now look, my girlfriend did participate and helped out a lot on that, but ultimately I felt like it was my project. It was on my shoulders. And so I kind of let it, the word we have for it is pod fade. I let it pod fade. And then I didn't, God, what year was that? Anyway, a couple of years later, I suddenly had the chance to say, okay, I'm ready to start this company because I want support. It's only going to work if there are people in place to catch this thing, to take this, hand the baton to.
Right.
And so that's sort of, I think, the way I've been running Growth Network Podcasts is very collaborative, because everyone has to learn how to support each other and test and do everything that way, because I just saw what it was like as a solo, and I don't want to be a solopreneur. That's just the most, I want it to be collaborative, and so. And
it's better that way. Things come out better that way. Yeah.
You see familiar faces when you hop on a call, and you maybe not be able to sprint as fast sometimes because you have to loop people in, and you have to wait for people to learn their own lessons, and leadership is about just sort of weathering some of that and knowing that it's it needs to be slower so that they can learn, so that the next one will be faster. And and then of course the pandemic is just everything's slower all the time kind of situation. But I think that that's being able to do it as a team, do it collaboratively. The clients we've had that are the most open to that collaboration, one, stick with us. Two, their projects go the best because they're like interlocking pieces instead of they're just hoping that you come in and do the thing.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. Great.
Awesome. Well, it's been great talking with you, and
you as well.
I don't see any questions in here. We kind of made some time for some Q&A, but seeing none, I'm saying we've had a great conversation here, and it's been really
so great,
wonderful working with you on this project, and glad we could kind of tell the LinkedIn world about it a little bit.
Yes.
And start to preview so that they're able to see in the coming weeks the other content that we're working on.
Yes. Thank you, Lynz. I feel so fortunate for this partnership. So I'm so glad.
It's been a treat, and it shall continue to be. So I'm going to wrap up the broadcast. Thank you so much for everyone for watching, and like we say at the end of Mission Megaphone, go out there and find something that inspires you and share it with others. I think we say it more elegantly in the tagline, but that's the sort of basic premise, which is find something that inspires you and then be sure to pass it along.